Did anybody else have a hand?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that in this case, some people might say that that person that was choosing to stay might be considered, the love would be considered irrational because they know their situation, and if, especially they've acknowledged it, that they shouldn't be there, yet they can't find themselves able to leave. I think that would be, it'd be hard for me to make a case that perhaps they don't want what's happening because they've acknowledged it, they know what's going on, people can tell them. And if you can still come up with all these reasons that this is terrible for you, but you have to stay, then I don't think that's very rational.
That is what?
Given what's going on. I don't think it's very rational.
Right.
Stay, keep yourself in that position. Well, knowing what you're going.
I mean, it could also be, obviously, people, just like people can be addicted to very strange things, like they can be addicted to grief. I mean, there are people who are addicted to things that hurt them, and not just hurt them in the long run, but also hurt them right here and now. So, or maybe the extreme up and downs, right? Because if somebody's extremely emotionally or verbally abusive or even physically abusive, and then at some point we'll see there might be some kind of makeup, whatever that consistent makeup situation, right? So it's up and then it's down, so that roller coaster could probably be addictive. So that, of course, would be irrational, but you can see why the addiction might form. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, obviously there's like 100 different scenarios of this type of relationship, like between parent and child and stuff. But what I'm thinking is that it basically comes down to what type of love we're talking about. Because, like, if someone has been married to this person for a long time, or if it's a child and the parent's abusive, I don't think it's really irrational for them to love that person. But we're talking more like a family love or a committed love.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking like in love, like the really romantic or passionate type, whatever, then I think that's kind of irrational. If like a woman is like, oh, but he's so perfect and he's dreamy, and like that would be kind of irrational if she's getting.
Yeah. Yeah, and that does make a difference. So I just wanted to mention before commenting more on that there's another way that she loves someone irrationally without thinking about that relation of fit. Does the love fit the person? And also without thinking about the person as not being there, meaning cases where people perhaps think that their that husband is still alive, not those cases, but cases where we completely misperceive the features of the person. So the woman who thinks her dead husband is still alive and she loves him who's still alive, she's having a kind of hallucination because the husband isn't alive. But when we love someone, but we completely misperceive their features, that's not a hallucination, that's actually an illusion. Because we see, and most of the times when we start out in a new relationship, it is a kind of an illusion because we don't know the person, right? So we attribute features to the person that the person does not have. Sometimes that doesn't work out because eventually we see past those, right, illusions. Illusions will stop. And then hopefully we can live with what we see after that, but maybe we can't. So the beginning of a relationship often is an illusion. And being in love often is an illusion, unless you're in love with your childhood friend, maybe it's not, but otherwise it's probably an illusion, or involves an illusion. An illusion here is that you attribute a bunch of features to the person that the person does not have. The same when a person breaks up with you and then suddenly you are obsessed with the person. Many people can't see all the flaws that were in the relationship and all the flaws that actually perhaps made it a good thing that the relationship ended. I'm not talking about those cases where the jerk is like breaking up, and being really rude about it. I'm talking about cases where, yeah, maybe you didn't want the breakup, but objectively speaking, maybe that was a good thing that it occurred, but afterwards then you become completely obsessed with the person, and now you fail to see all the bad things of the relationship, you fail to see all the bad things about the person. What you see are just all the good things, and maybe a bunch of other things that weren't even there. And so that's, again, an illusion because you're attributing features to the person that the person did not have, and so if you love them partially because of that, then that would also be irrational. So that's sort of the view. That's a view that I stated, right? So, supported by a bunch of other people, but then there were the two interesting views that I just wanted to get into, so we can also discuss this more broadly. But Velleman had this so he goes a little bit beyond just romantic love, right? So he goes beyond sort of to love more generally. That could be love of, somebody you're romantically attracted to, or it could be love of a child or grandfather, as he mentions. But so David Velleman, in that love as a moral emotion, he says, basically has this view which is difficult. It's difficult to see how he could have that view. But it's sort of a very, I don't know what to call it. It's sort of the idea behind the view is beautiful. So the idea is that you really ought to love everyone the same, right? Because the idea in his paper is that everyone, so it's sort of like thinking of the Constitution, that we all born and sort of with the same rights, and it's sort of adding to that we should love everyone the same way, because everyone, and he's of course meaning everyone who's human, we should love every human the same way. And we shouldn't love them for their features, we shouldn't love them for the way they walk or talk, we should love them for what's inside of them. So that all sounds good. He also has an explanation, because of course he's very well aware of that. We don't love everyone. And he has an explanation of that. So he says something like, well, but that's just a psychological fact, right? For one, we don't encounter all people in the world. Some people we just happen to encounter in a closer setting, and so on. So there's a psychological reason that we don't love everyone the same, but we really ought to. So that's where the moral emotion comes in. That we really ought to love everyone the same. Okay, so that's his view. He's gotten a lot of criticism for that, as you can imagine. And then I wanted to mention Nico Kolatny's view. And one of the things that Nico Kolatny points out is that by Velleman's account, then everyone ought to be replaceable in a relationship, right? So if someone is having a relationship with Bree, it shouldn't matter if you put any one of you instead of Bree, because whoever loves Bree should love that person we put in her place to the same extent, right? So Bree becomes replaceable, but so do you. Everyone in principle becomes replaceable, not psychologically, but rather it shouldn't matter. So that's Kolatny's criticism one of his criticisms of Velleman. But Kolatny also has a view that's a little strange. So he thinks that you cannot or you ought not love someone, and that relates to the longer term love. You ought not to love someone unless you have a shared history. So in other words, if you don't have a shared history and you love someone, that's irrational. That's one way to put it. Or inappropriate, or not right, or not the true kind, or however you want to put it. Yes?
Well, I just thought of this, what about when you have a baby? I love that baby, like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't have it.
Yeah, so that's a good kind of example, actually. Well, of course, you had the 9 months, but
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. But also, one thing that he initially, in some of his initial publications, didn't point out, he didn't say anything about that history. So, yeah, maybe the history is needed, but it certainly can't be enough, because what if it's a completely bad history? Someone hitting you every day. We have a history together, so now it's okay to love them? No, right? That doesn't work that way. So, in some sense, I mean, it would have to be a good history. And then we're back to, then he would have to explain what does he mean by good. And then maybe you would just say, well, it just has to be a good relationship, or it just has to be a good fit, and then we're back to the fit theory. Yes.
But I would say that you can have a good relationship without loving somebody.
Without what?
Without loving someone, you can have a good relationship.
Yes, certainly. But now we are more moving a little bit away from love. We would definitely have a good relationship. So there's an important difference between relationships in many different senses. And it's, that's right. And there are some very interesting literature on relationships more generally, including friendships and other things, and things can become like very muddled, where it's everywhere from between, you're married to someone, or you're seeing someone, or it's friends with benefits, or it's in the movie No Strings Attached, or it's platonic friendship, or it's family friendship, or that's very complicated, all those distinctions, and that's also very interesting actually to talk about. But yes, you can have so that too. You can have certainly the relationship, having a good relationship together does not suffice for love either, right? But I also wanted to say a bit about the in the chapter I put the Olsen twins, and did that picture come out? He defends the view that lovable ones are not replaceable, which is a view that many people hold. Or loved ones are not replaceable. So in other words, and now we're talking about even if they have the same features, and the Olsen twins really don't, but they're good examples.
The Olsen twins are mirror twins. They're opposites.
Oh, yeah. But say you have two people and they're like, by your point of view, indistinguishable. Many people would say, well, if you have a relationship with one, you would mind if someone put the other one in their place, and that they're replaceable. And so I don't want to deny that either, because psychologically that's the way it works with many things. If I have a vase, and my grandmother gave me the vase, and you come with a precisely identical vase, down to the molecule, precisely identical vase, and then you say, hey, I'll just put that one here and take your grandmother's vase, I would still object. Right? Let's not even say that one is more valuable than the other, let's just say that it's just an old vase, so they're equally valuable. But I would still object because of the connection that the vase has to my grandmother. The one doesn't, and the one does. But so in that sense, I mean, there may be that people are not replaceable. But he makes a further move in his arguments. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. So Galatny says, because people are replaceable, we cannot or should not love them for their features. So the argument is supposed to go something like this, I think. So let's say we accept that people are not replaceable. Just like I wouldn't let you carry my grandmother's face away. So I wouldn't let you just replace someone I was seeing with someone who's identical down to the smallest molecules. Well, his argument might be something like this, that, well, if I really loved the person for a particular feature, say their hair, or their self-confidence, or the fact that they're fun to hang out with, or whatever you can think of. The smile, anything. If I really loved them for some of those features, or a whole bunch of those features, and that was the main, that was why I loved them. That was why I loved them. You can add maybe 2 lists of features, and that's why I love that person. Well, if that is the only reason, given all these features, that I love the person, then why can't you replace them, right? Because you're replacing them with, we're assuming, you're replacing them with someone who also on the inside and the outside has those same features. Fun to hang out with, school, blah, blah, blah. And so he says, therefore, because we cannot replace loved ones, it cannot be true that we really love people for the features that they have. That's basically his argument. And so, anyway, so that's an argument, and it could be one that you agree with. I happen not to agree with it. And the reason I don't agree with it is that he often, when he's writing, Willamette does the same. They move sort of from talking about true love to talking about reasonable or rational love. Well, true love, in one sense anyway, just means love, in one sense. It means that love is really there, as opposed to that you fake it. Right? That's one sense of true love. Whereas reasonable love doesn't mean that love is there. It means that something more, that it's also something that ought to be there, or it's okay it's there. So they move back and forth between those two things a lot. And so that complicates evaluating their arguments. But if we focus on the distinction between when is it okay to love someone and when do you really love someone, then there could be cases where you really do love someone because of their smile or because they're fun to hang out with or whatever. There could be cases psychologically where that could be the case. Now that does not mean it's necessarily okay that you do it, but so I think it's important to keep that distinction in mind, the distinction between is the love really there, and then the further question is it okay that it's there? Is it appropriate or rational or irrational? So that's sort of what that whole debate is about, which gets is probably the most complicated chapter in the book. So I wanted to ask a question, and then maybe I'll see if Bree has something she wants to ask. I wanted to ask a question about those features and what you think in terms of the features. So, can you love a person in virtue of features that they have? Not that it's necessarily okay to do it, but can you love a person merely because they have the following 15 features? What do you think? It could be physical or personality or how they act around you or Yeah? Anyone else?
I mean, if you try to describe why you love somebody, probably don't list off features or nothing.
Right, it's usually what we do, right? It tends not to be that we would just say, oh, why do you love Susan? Well, it's Susan, rather than her identical twin. I mean, this is kind of an odd way to put it. But, of course, then when someone could challenge you and say, but her identical twin has those features too, and then you might be in trouble. But yeah, so the further question then becomes like, what kinds of features are the kinds of features that could make love not okay, or something you should not be in? So Bree was sort of talking a bit about that before, and some of you. But what are some of those features that would be features where it's clear that you, the love, even if you do love them, the love is irrational?
Well, if it's strictly like physical features, because those can always be changed, like hair color or length or, nose shape or whatever, because those can all be augmented.
Yeah.
So if you love someone based solely on the only reasons you like them are because of physical features, then it's not irrational love because those could all be changed.
Right. So you love someone because they have long hair,
Yeah.
and then that's right, but they cut it off, and then your love ends. Yeah, that would work. Or that would seem to be an inappropriate kind of love. So it seems as things that can change a lot. But a lot of things can change, right? So you can also be even in a long-term relationship with a person who happens to be in a really bad accident later that makes them completely messed up, so now they look nothing like the one that you were with earlier. And let's say they also had their private parts damaged, so you can't have sex with them anymore either. But they're the same personality. They manage to be the same personality. And we can create an even worse case scenario where the person's an accident and all those features change, but the personality change as well. And then we can create a third scenario where the physical features stay the same, but where the personality changes, which of course happens with older people often, who may or may not be in a relationship, but if they get Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. So what should we say in those cases? Is it rational to stop loving a person in that case?
If the person who was there, because you really are like your personality and your memories, and so if that person is gone, then they're not the same person you were alone with, so it's rational to fall out of love with them.
Right. So in the personality case, it's perhaps easier to say something like that because it often seems best if you love someone because of their personality primarily.
Especially if with the example of Alzheimer's, if they've been together for 50 years or something, then their physical features have already completely changed from when you met them. So you obviously didn't love them because of that. Because other than maybe like the twinkle in their eye, everything else has changed.
Yeah. Well, what about the case where let's leave personality out of it? So you just got married to the love of your life, and now the person is in an accident and has to sit in a wheelchair the rest of your life. And a lot of the stuff you used to like to do together involved physical activity. So you love to go rock climbing and hiking and biking and swimming, and now you can't do any of that. How do you think you would react?
love that person so much that they still stay with them. Like even, because they could go do those fun activities with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe if it was like not as strong of a love to even start out with, or if they were just in love with the idea of a perfect marriage that looks pretty, like ideal, then they may just, not be able to do it. They may still love that person in a way where they want them to be okay and taken care of, but maybe not like want to continue that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So these are So these are some difficult questions. So one of the difficult questions that I just want to throw out there and then see if Bree has anything. I want to go back to what you said earlier. So like your kids or your mom or your dad, assuming it's not a wildly abusive mom or dad. So let's say a good mom or dad, good kids, you love them. Now let's say your kid grows up and they become wildly abusive teenagers, right? So had that been a romantic situation, the appropriate thing would be to remove yourself from that situation. In this case, you might not be able to, but then the question arises, is this, that you love them, let's say you love them, is that love now appropriate because you're related to them, or is it still inappropriate or irrational? So that's a question to think about. And the other case I wanted to mention was the case of altruism, the extreme cases of altruism. So like that guy who stayed with his friend during 9/11 could get down in time just taking the stairs, but stayed with the guy in the wheelchair because he couldn't leave him. And so he actually gave up his own life. And so all those we call heroes, or people who jump in the river to save a child, and they die, or they're close to dying, sometimes they die. Or the man in New York who had 2 little kids with him, waiting for the train, jumping down because someone with seizures fell down, covered him, and the story ended well because he was able to press his body over the other person's body, so the train simply passed over them and they weren't hurt. But that was really risky, and so he put himself in a high-risk situation with kids standing up there. So these are cases that are difficult, where people often talk about romantic love as rational or irrational. But you could also extend it and ask about family love or altruism, other love. Like when does it go too far, right? When does that become irrational? Just because we think someone is a hero, that doesn't mean that what they did couldn't be irrational. You have some follow-ups on this?
Yeah, I just kind of want to keep the discussion going maybe. As you were talking, I kind of want to bring it back to, as an example, when you're in a romantic relationship with someone and what happens when that person becomes physically disabled, right? It seems like, and I see that a lot of you guys are quiet, and I'm wondering if you're quiet, not just because you're sleeping, but I'm wondering if you're quiet because it seems like if you want to say it's rational to fall out in love with that person, or that your love for that person may change, I'm wondering if your intuition is that superficial if I feel that way? If I really genuinely love you, shouldn't I love you beyond just the physical? Or, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just say there are 2 people in a relationship, and one of them has some sort of accident where they're paralyzed and have to be in a wheelchair or whatever. I think it could be really a way for you to really evaluate how much you really love that person. Because honestly, I mean, if you really genuinely love that person, then I don't think it would be. I mean, obviously, living with a significant disability like paraplegia or something like that is difficult for the person experiencing that, but also for their loved ones and everything. Because again, you may not be able to do certain activities that you used to like to do, like rock climbing or whatever. But yeah, again, like I just think that it's really like it can really show you how much, how much you really love that person. Because again, like if you just decide, oh well, I don't want to be in a relationship with you just because you're in a wheelchair, like I don't know. Personally, I think that that's pretty.
Sounds superficial.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, because again, like that person, if there was some sort of accident or like if they were born like that, it's like that's just how they have to live their life, and essentially like they just, are sitting down all the time.
And then you would have chosen them for that reason, but in this case,
They changed.
yeah, they changed, and if you leave them, you could say that, well, maybe you did just love them for those features before.
So like in romantic relationships, it seems like the love really develops when you bond with that person. Like once two people have kind of bonded and that love starts developing, like that's essentially where it seems like that love is deeply rooted. So, don't be afraid. I mean, I want your opinion. I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate and I'm just going to say, it seems like if me and my partner, our sense in our relationship, our thing was we went rock climbing, we did a lot of physical activities, or maybe we're very, sexually promiscuous people who like to have sex a lot, and we couldn't do any of these things anymore. And these were the types of things that we did to bond and help to grow our love. And now we can't do that anymore.
You can't find a new way.
So your suggestion would be to find a new
Well,
bond.
to try to, at least, but that's no guarantee that you will.
Okay. Yeah.
My parents actually, this was early on in the relationship after we got married. My mom got in a car accident, and she was in a wheelchair and thought it was going to be wrong for her. And she changed, and she didn't even remember. I think I was already born. I was the only one other than her mother that she remembered. And my dad, I guess his wife, were more definitely should just leave someone because of that. Because my dad stayed, and he loved her, so he stayed, and he let her just eventually remember. And she wasn't completely the same, but eventually she started becoming the same, but he loved her regardless. And there were some things that they loved to do that they couldn't do for a long time, but even now, because like my mom, she can almost do everything because like, she's a pinched nerve, and if she does something she shouldn't, she could actually, like it could eventually snap and she could die. And but things like that, and so to me I feel like that is superficial. You just live on and you can't find another way. Because real love is, you have that bond, and it shouldn't matter whether you can go rock climbing anymore because it wasn't the rock climbing that loved, it was that person. It was that time.
It was the bonding. So I definitely agree with you that, so like in your example, that's definitely virtuous that your dad stayed there and loved that person. But maybe the question is, like I said, playing devil's advocate. But the question is, despite that, is that rational? Or maybe can we even have a conversation about love and rationality? Right? Are those two things that we can marry together to even have a conversation?
Well, I was going to say, in the case of if someone who winds up disabled and can't do anything, what if, in the name of love, they send their partner away because their partner no longer feels good with them? So is that like a similar situation? And so instead of the partner staying, the partner who is disabled sends away because they don't want them to have to, like they still love them.
Oh, so it's the one who's disabled
But
who
they're-
sends the other person away.
Yeah, just tells them, go do the things that we like to do, but it's okay, find someone else to do it with, or a friend, or,
But they stay together, or do they break up completely?
I guess either way. I was thinking like separate almost completely, just, like
Yeah.
that love is still there, but instead of love keeping them together, the love is forcing them apart.
Yeah. I mean, there are cases where people who really are not capable of having sex anymore allow for the other person to get that elsewhere, where they were very much against it before. But there are also those who completely just send the other person away, which may not be a rational thing, at least not without discussing it. I mean, if they completely break up, there's some people who act out of, like, you don't want me anymore, so you might as well just leave. Yeah.
I think it's something that's kind of like irrational to begin with, because like it's going to be different person to person. Like some people like early on, something will happen, they'll stay together forever. And then then sometimes like high profile ones, like a lot of like presidential nominees like John Edwards and Nikki Rich, they had their lives for like 20, 30 years, I think, for some of them, and then she gets cancer or she's in a wheelchair, and then they cheat on her. So I think it's like pretty bad. It's different for some people.
So I keep hearing people have comments about, well, it just kind of depends. It's the case by case thing. Do you all think that we can talk about love in a universal term? Granted, so talking about specifically romantic relationships, everyone's relationship is different, right? You got two people that may be like really active in terms of like physical activity. You have two people that may like to play games 13 hours a day online with each other. I don't know, whatever floats your boat, right? I guess the question that I want to know is, does it really matter that it's a different couple and maybe different things? Can we talk about love universally? I see some people shaking their heads, yeah. Or,
Love is gonna mean something different to everybody.
I can't hear you.
So love is gonna mean something different to everybody.
But it seems like, so love is something different to everybody, but it seems like when we talk about one of the partners in a relationship has changed, and let's say physically as an example, that person has changed, it seems like everybody seems disgusted by the person that wants to leave the partner who physically changed. It seems like the intuition is that I'm getting from your facial expressions that that's not really good, it's superficial.
Superficial.
Oh, what were you gonna say? Well, you and then you, and then somebody else had their hand up back there.
So a lot of people think it's superficial, but once you're thrown into that situation, you may not love that person. Like if you were, you may have loved other things about him, but you may have been very sexual with him as well. So you loved all the aspects of it, but whenever one of them's cut off completely, you may, it may not be enough anymore to. Do you think that sounds bad? But you may.
Yeah, be honest, yeah.
I was going to say that, I was going to say that, like, I think the reason people are so disgusted is because I think it's like a test of like love, like true deep like love, and it's like if you do leave the relationship, then you probably didn't love them in the first place, and people look at it in the way like these people were together for so long, but he left or she left, and that meant that it was like this false like sense of like I look to these people as like a guide in my life about relationships because they were together for so long, but then she left, so now I'm disgusted because I don't think that she truly loved him, or I think this people's idea of how love is supposed to like conquer all and span across everything, and when it doesn't, it's like, and that's the disgusting thing.
But it's a case-by-case situation. That's what your classmates are saying. In this relationship, if the woman, as an example, left because, I don't know, her partner was dismembered or something, and they couldn't be physical anymore, as an example. It's a case-by-case situation. Why would we
Socially,
discuss
from
it?
the outside looking in, that's what we're seeing. Not
First,
necessarily.
you feel it's okay because you leave. You don't feel the same way that other people feel over their perspective.
But see, doesn't that cause tension with what you said earlier, though? Because my question is, can we talk about love universally? It seems like everybody wants to say, well, it depends on this person, it depends on that situation. But then I throw out something that seems morally impermissible or disgusting. Then everyone's intuition is like, oh, no, that doesn't seem right. It seems like you should stick with that person, thick and thin throughout.
Well, I mean, it also, it's situational, but you can break it down into like how long they've been together, because like at my high school there was a couple, and I'm sure that at some point they said I love you, but they've been dating for less than a year, and he got diagnosed with leukemia, and she stayed with him for a while, but they ended up breaking up. And is that, I don't know the leukemia, I'm sure, I can't might have. He got really, really sick and he lost a lot of weight. He had to have some amputations. And it was really intense. It was probably way too intense for, you know, a junior in high school to deal with. And so is it, you know, disgusting that she did that? But no, because they hadn't known each other that long before he got sick, and it was a really big, you know, commitment for someone so young and everything.
That's a really good point. Okay.
Yeah, I just said that people keep in mind that they have their own free will. No one says how many times you're allowed to love in life. You have to always love to only one person. Sure, maybe one person at that particular time, but maybe you have to stay with that person your entire life. Someone said that. So, if you decide that you should leave, it's your free will, it's your life. Do what you do. Be happy, it's your life. If there doesn't make you happy anymore, find someone else. You can make the world a happier place if you're happy.
Okay, with last and then with
Almost piggybacking off of that, the idea of love, I think, is universal and that everybody understands that love is deeply caring for someone else. But try to tell someone how they need to love someone, and they're going to get loved. So yes, it's individual and situational, but it is still a universal idea, and that everybody understands that love is deeply caring across the board. But then again, it's also different by culture
And how they receive
and how they
your perception response.
So it's universal.
All right.
All right.
That was a great.
See you on
Do
Monday.
what you do, and don't tell anybody else how to run.